This little booklet, INRI de Mysterious Rosy Rubiae et Aureae Crucis 777. This little booklet is almost 100 years old. It was published in 1924, and it was a gift from, I believe, Phyllis Seckler. Gave me this and the God Eater and a couple of other things of thelemic interest back in the mid 1970s. I have to be very careful because it truly is falling apart. This is the frontispiece page. And it talks about, in great detail, this is by Frater Akkad, or Frater Akkad. It talks about the Hermetic Rose Cross, and more or less the Golden Dawn and 5 equals 6 initiatory grade, and originally designated such by the Golden Dawn, and as a matter of fact, at that level of Golden Dawn initiation, you are honored or deserve to create your own Hermetic Rose Cross to wear as your jewel of your grade. Now, why am I bringing up all of this? It's because, first of all, I intend to share with you this little booklet. It'll probably take us today and tomorrow to get through it, but it's absolutely wonderful. I think we did it before, 2 or 3 years ago. But in preparation for this, I've also posted on my website a PDF page by page of this that I found on the internet, so you could have your own to follow along, because it's a beautiful document. And if you'll notice that it has marginal notes, and the marginal notes can be, not all of them are breathtakingly significant, but if you have a facsimile of this, you'll be able to share the full impact of it as a literary document. So I've posted that, so if you want to print out one yourself for tomorrow and probably the next day, you can follow along. Or if you have a copy of this, please get it out and follow along. But in preparation of that, I want to talk about that. A long time ago, I spoke someplace at like a pagan pride festival or something like that, an outdoor thing, and I just said a few words, and you know how I am. I just sort of say things off the top of my head and digress. And so somebody wrote me in response to one of my many digressions, and I answered them, and it has something to directly to do with people's initiatory status, personal initiatory status vis-a-vis their initiatory status in a club of some kind. Now we could look at the OTO as a club, or you could even look at the outer trappings of the AA as a club, or the Golden Dawn as a club, or the Rosicrucian Order Amorc as a club, or the Martinists as a club. But I'm going to read part of the letter and my letter back, because it'll sort of give us an introduction to my introduction of the introduction of what we're going to do with the Frater Akkad thing. Hi, Lon. Your experiences in the beginning of your path were very close to what I experienced, although I wound up in another order, and I think the order that they are assuming that is my order is the OTO, okay, because that'll become clear here. And of course, I am in the OTO, and it's my home order too. I thought it very interesting when you started to talk about Aleister Crowley being from Satan himself. Well, I mentioned that when I first got the Thoth Tarot, I didn't know anything about Aleister Crowley, and the first thing I did find out was from an old sensationalist thing that he was a Satanist, and I said, oh shit, I don't want to have anything to do with that. But anyway, I swear I still wonder, because I'm incredibly curious. Good for you. I have finally come to a place where I can learn a little more about him without wanting to banish constantly. I had the same reaction as you did, but it looks like another opportunity to unlearn old belief systems that no longer serve. Bravo. Also, I thought it interesting that you made reference to 5 = 6. Now, that's why I'm bringing that up. This is 5 = 6. Can I ask you why you use the 5 = 6 in my conversation when your order, the OTO, uses a system based on degrees? Okay, like Masonic degrees. Okay, so the OTO degrees don't have degree by degree parallels with the Golden Dawn degrees. Okay, it's a different kind of universe. You said, and this is the quote that she's using, you said, no adept in the world can look at you and make you a 5 = 6. You then alluded to it being more about self-mastery, which would be right. Can I ask you why you use the 5 = 6 when your order is based on these degrees? I am a 4 = 7 in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and would like to have a conversation with you regarding this. Would it be a breach of an oath? Okay, hope to hear from you soon. My answer was, you mentioned my, quote, orders system as if my personal spiritual adventure needs to be defined by nomenclature of the clubs I belong to. I'm in lots of clubs, including the Golden Dawn, and I'd sure hate to think I could only express the nuances of my personal journey within the narrow vocabulary of any one of them. I was a Boy Scout for a while. I made it to 2nd class, which, when I think of it, is pretty much accurately describes my current spiritual level. My point of view is that everyone on the planet No, every monad of evolving consciousness in the cosmos is on the initiatory climb up the tree of life. We're all in the big AA or the big golden dawn. It doesn't matter what you think your religion or philosophy or order or affiliation is or isn't. If your level of consciousness has been raised to that level which is exemplified by, say, Tifereth, then you are a 5 equals 6, and it's nobody's business but your own. But let's say a person hasn't perfectly aligned and joined his or her microcosm with the macrocosm, hasn't opened their Anahata chakra in a smooth and balanced manner, hasn't raised their consciousness to that level for which Christ and Krishna and the radiant frog goddess Mabuba are merely metaphors, then that person is not a 5 equals 6, no matter what club he or she belongs to. In parentheses, I said, I made up the thing about the frog goddess. In the Golden Dawn, degrees are meant to be a serious map of this journey, complete with attunement exercises, which in and of themselves are also metaphors for the interior processes. But in the Golden Dawn, we are not obliged to actually attain those levels of consciousness in order to undergo the 1 equals 10 or the 2 equals 9 or the 4 equals 7 or the 5 equals 6 initiations and carry home our certificate. Crowley's AA was a little more to the point, saying, in so many words, you become a 5 equals 6 when you are a 5 equals 6. Or the degree of your choice. Your certificate is who you are. I'm saying you are who and what you are, even if you don't belong to any club. There, and that's on my first cup of morning tea. Okay, that's my answer to that question. Now, in my own past, my awkward, bumbling past, I started joining some clubs, and actually, the first major club that I belonged to was the Rosicrucian Order, Amorc. Okay, and the Rosicrucian Order Amorc has or claims this wonderful thing that they call the Hermetic Rose Cross as one of their symbols. Now, it appears in the Rosicrucian Manual and in several documents, but as far as I got in the Rosicrucian Order Amorc, I don't recall a single monograph, and maybe they've included it later, that had any discussion of the details of this at all. But there was a giant one of these in color, a beautiful color one, and they're colored sort of like this. And this is someone who was nice enough at a Golden Dawn event to give me one of this. A beautiful one. I would say it was 5 feet tall, okay? And it was on display at the local lodge that I was an active member of. And I was so fascinated by it that I started to get poster board and colored inks, and in my attempt to study it on my own, I didn't know what any of it meant. I just said, well, I'm going to paint or draw or illustrate versions of this. Okay. And I found, a color copy to copy. And I'm not very handy with things. I had to learn. I used actual colored inks with pinpoints, different types of pinpoints. And I didn't even know what the Hebrew was. I just copied the images of those Hebrew letters. And as I did it, I had to just almost accidentally learn what those Hebrew letters were. And those pentagrams and things like that, yeah, I wasn't sure what any of that was, but that's when I learned what those elemental symbols were. And that's when I learned what those alchemical elements were. And I was curious, what is this INRI and what is that ERO? And why is there the sun and all of that? And why are the arms colored the way they are? Why is the right arm there blue, and why is it just bonehead copying the thing? I had to learn a whole bunch of shit just on my own. And I was absolutely fascinated by that rose cross. It hooked me. And of course, we know that a very stylized, minimalistic version of the rose cross is what appears on the back of the Thoth Tarot, with none of the detailed doodahs, but just as a color thing. Okay. So to close today's thing, before we tackle the Frater Akkad thing tomorrow, I'm going to share this with you. It starts The Secrets of the Rose Cross Back. And the epigram is not this symbol to be found on the breast of all true brethren of the rosy cross? Hold fast to this jewel and treasure it as thy life itself, for many and great are its virtues. And that same quote's going to be found in that Frater Akkad thing yesterday, or tomorrow, excuse me. In some dimension, tomorrow is yesterday. It may seem odd that I dedicated this is from Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot, Chapter 8. I'm not going to read it all. It may seem odd that I dedicate an entire chapter to the design that adorns the back of each of the 78 cards of the Thoth Tarot. I beg your indulgence and assure you with some confidence that your patience will be rewarded. For me, the beautiful rose cross that appears on the back of each of the cards is the image that first attracted me to the Thoth Tarot. It's Lady Harris's exquisite interpretation of the Hermetic rose cross, and is arguably the most recognizable feature of the deck. As a young tarot enthusiast, I became intimately familiar with every detail of the design by helping a friend reproduce the image as a stained glass window. And I've also got it in the front and back of the thing here. And you'll see many pictures of Constance and I standing in front of the stained glass window. We packaged it up very tightly when we moved here. Sadly, we have yet to unpack it here. But anyway, it was clear to me, even as a novice, that the large red, blue, yellow, and green squares that form the extremities of the arms of the cross could represent the 4 tarot suits: wands, cups, swords, and discs. And that each of the 22 petals of the great rose represent the 22 trump cards. One afternoon after Lodge Convocation, and this is the Rosicrucian Order Amorc Lodge Convocation, which were held on, I believe, Saturdays in Long Beach. I belong to Abdiel Lodge. I don't know if it's still going. I was smugly sharing these observations. In other words, I was standing in front of that big rose cross there, and I bet that red arm of the cross there would be like the suit of wands, and the blue arm would be the suit of cups, and the yellow one is and the blue one is earth, and I was pompously saying what I'd learned as I was busy creating multiple paintings of it. Anyway, I was smugly sharing these observations with another neophyte when I was soundly upbraided by an elderly senior member, his past master actually, who fixed his gray gaze on me and in the most solemn tone said, "You have seen but the earliest rays." That's just how he said it. "You have seen but the earliest rays." I innocently laughed in his face, not out of disrespect, but because his delivery was so dramatic and corny that I was sure he was trying to be funny. He was not amused. "Come with me," he said, and I knew I was in trouble. I felt terrible. I followed him outside the temple, fully expecting to be hurled into the eternal outer darkness. Instead, we walked about a half a block down the street to where his car was parked. I awkwardly started to apologize, but I don't think he heard me. He opened the trunk of his car and lifted a dark purple velvet bag from a leather briefcase. He undid the gold-braided tie and lifted out a golden rose cross about 5 inches tall. It hung from a blue ribbon, as I recall, and was proportioned exactly like the Harris cross, but it was festooned with many more colorful details. So all of those other things, the stars, the alchemical symbol, the elemental symbols, and each of the petals of the rose were all colored enamel. Well, I'll describe it here. He didn't say a word. He just held it up about a foot before my eyes and let it twirl slowly in the late afternoon sunlight. It was indescribably beautiful. Every petal, 22, every petal of the great rose was brightly enameled and displayed an exquisitely formed Hebrew letter of contrasting color. Upon each arm of the cross was a pentagram surrounded by the elemental symbols for fire, water, air, earth, and spirit. The alchemical symbols for salt, mercury, and sulfur were nestled in the triple lobes that decorated each end of each arm. A hexagram surrounded by colorful planetary symbols was centered upon a white square directly above the great rose. Just to remind you what I'm talking about. Now, if you can imagine that every line that you see, every straight line of the symbols, every curved line of the petals on the rose, and the small rose in the center, every line was not a drawn line, but a small, tiny, golden wire. And the color of each of those things inside those little walls of golden wire were liquid enamel, so that they each had a depth of color. And the rose petals particularly, there was so much in liquid enamel in it that was held in by the little walls of the golden wire, that they were raised. They had little it was domes of color. So those roses were smooth bumps of pure color that you could look right down into, like the paint job of a Rolls Royce. It was just awesome. Upon each arm of the cross, was a colored pentagram surrounded by the elemental symbols for fire, water, air, earth, and spirit. The alchemical symbols for salt, sulfur, and mercury. Okay, I've already said that, excuse me. The object was obviously made by a skilled craftsman. The only gold visible on the front gleamed from the raised outlines, gold wire, that trimmed the edges and each of the 22 petals of the rose. Each petal was meticulously filled with a rounded drop of colored enamel that gave the appearance of a precious stone. The back had no enameling at all, just gold, polished to a mirrored finish upon which words were engraved in Latin. My street-side psychopomp would not let me read what was written there. He sort of protected. Can't read that. After a moment or two of allowing me to gawk in wonder, he told me with obvious pleasure, "This is the Rosy Cross. It's all here." He then put it back in the bag and shut the trunk. I'd soon learned that this was the device worn as the personal lament of initiates of the Golden Dawn, who achieved the degree of Adeptus Minor, the same degree in which they were required to paint their own deck of tarot cards. However, the years would reveal to me that it's much more than a colorful decoration of a fraternal order's badge of distinction. Properly understood, it is at once the door, the lock, the key to the temple of the Western mysteries. It and the tree of life, which we'll discuss in the next chapter, quite literally are the table of contents of the tarot. Tomorrow, we will look further into the Rosy Cross by sharing this precious little document. So until then, Continue to be good to yourself. Be good to each other if you get a chance to. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will.